So you've decided to raise chickens. Not a backyard coop, not a dozen hens pecking around a garden. A real operation. The kind that supplies the eggs sitting in your refrigerator right now, or the chicken breast that ends up on a plate at a restaurant tonight. On paper, it looks like one of the safest bets in American agriculture. Chicken is the most eaten meat in the country. Eggs are in nearly every kitchen. Demand never really goes away. A company representative slides a brochure across the table. The cover shows a row of gleaming new chicken houses, steel-roofed, spotless. Inside, a chart, 4 houses, 1 flock rotation, and a projected income of over $200,000 a year. It looks like a machine that prints money quietly, in the background, while you sleep. Then comes the number underneath it. To build those 4 houses, you will need close to $1.5 million, sometimes closer to $2 million, and you haven't bought a single chicken yet. In fact, you never will. The chickens were never going to be yours. That single detail is the reason this business looks nothing like what people assume. Before this video ends, you'll understand why some poultry farmers are pushed toward bankruptcy while the company they raise chickens for reports $50 billion in annual revenue. You'll understand why an egg carton can jump from $2 to $5 in a single season, and why that has almost nothing to do with the chickens themselves. And you'll understand why an industry built on one of the simplest animals on earth has quietly become one of the most fragile financial systems in American food production. Poultry looks simple from the outside. A chicken eats, grows, and either lays eggs or becomes meat. There's no oil rig, no cruise ship engine, no casino security system, just a bird. But the moment you try to actually own a piece of that supply chain, the simplicity disappears. There are 2 completely different businesses hiding under the same word, chicken farm. One raises birds for meat, called broilers, on a 6 to 7 week cycle. The other keeps hens alive for a year or more to produce eggs. They have different buildings, different risks, different debt structures, and, as you're about to see, different ways of quietly making other people rich. 2 companies anchor this story. Tyson Foods, alongside Perdue Farms, Pilgrim's Pride, and Wayne-Sanderson Farms, controls the meat side. Together, 4 companies produce more than half of the chicken raised in the United States. On the egg side, one name towers above the rest: Cal-Maine Foods, the largest egg producer in the country, publicly traded, watched closely by Wall Street every time a disease outbreak hits a barn. Both empires rest on the same quiet foundation: thousands of individual farmers who signed a contract believing they were buying a future. What they actually bought turns out to be something else entirely. Start with the meat side, because this is where the illusion breaks first. A company like Tyson does not sell you chickens to raise and sell back at your own price. Instead, it delivers baby chicks, delivers the feed, delivers the medicine, and tells you exactly how to build the barn that will house them: the ventilation system, the flooring, the lighting curve, the water lines. You supply the land, the labor, the electricity, and the debt. The birds, from the day they hatch to the day they're loaded onto a truck, legally belong to the company the entire time. According to USDA estimates, one modern broiler house costs at least $350,000 to construct. Most operations need 4. That's close to $1.5 million in debt before a single chick arrives. And newer estimates from farmers building today put that number closer to $2 million. In 1987, a couple named Karen and Mitchell Crutchfield signed on to raise chickens for Tyson in Lamar, Arkansas. Their 2 houses cost around $150,000, a fraction of today's price. But before Tyson would even send the first shipment of chicks, the company required road improvements leading to the property. Later, it mandated an entirely new watering system. The cost of getting started kept moving because the company that wrote the contract also controlled every specification the farmer had to meet. That's the first crack in the dream. The contract isn't a partnership, it's a set of instructions attached to a loan. But the debt is only the entry fee. The real mechanism that decides whether a farmer survives or drowns hasn't even been introduced yet. In North Carolina, a farmer named Craig Watts signed a Perdue contract in 1991. He had a college degree. He understood agriculture. He assumed raising chickens would be a matter of following instructions and collecting a paycheck. What he didn't fully grasp, what most new growers don't fully grasp, is pay isn't fixed, it's ranked. Here's how it works. The company sets an average price per pound, say 5 cents, but no farmer actually receives exactly 5 cents. Instead, every farmer's flock is measured against every other nearby farmer's flock, mainly on feed conversion, how efficiently their birds turned feed into weight. The farmers with better numbers get paid more. The farmers with worse numbers get paid less. It's not a bonus system layered on top of a stable wage. It's zero sum. The total pie never grows. It's simply redivided, winners taking from losers, flock after flock. USDA data for 2020 shows the gap this creates. The bottom 20% of contract growers were paid 5 cents a pound or less. The top 20% were paid 9 cents a pound or more, nearly double for chickens raised under nearly identical company-issued instructions. Watts had a blunter way of describing it. He compared the system to the film Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. 2 men enter, 1 leaves. And here's the detail that makes the ranking feel almost designed to produce losers. The inputs that determine your score, the chicks you're given, their genetic health, the feed formula, the timing of pickup, are controlled by the company, not the farmer. You are being graded on a test where someone else wrote half your answers. In 2021, a group of contract farmers filed a lawsuit against the largest poultry processors, alleging the companies had built this system specifically to suppress earnings. Some plaintiffs said they worked 12 to 16-hour days while earning as little as $12,000 a year. Tyson and Perdue eventually agreed to a $35 million settlement, a rounding error against Tyson's $53 billion in annual revenue. That number is worth sitting with. $53 billion against family incomes that in some cases didn't clear the federal poverty line. But even the tournament isn't the biggest threat hanging over these barns. There's a version of this business that can erase everything, the debt, the flock, the year's income, within a single week. That threat doesn't live on the meat side of the industry. It lives with the egg layers. Switch now to the egg side and the economics rearrange completely. A broiler lives 6 or 7 weeks before slaughter. A laying hen has to survive, stay healthy, and keep producing for 12 to 18 months before she's no longer profitable. That single difference changes everything about risk. A sick broiler flock is a bad month. A sick laying flock can be a bad year, sometimes a bad decade, depending on how fast the barn can be repopulated and certified clean again. Cal-Maine Foods sits at the center of the egg industry the way Tyson sits at the center of meat. It doesn't rely on thousands of small independent contract growers the way broiler companies do. It owns and operates much of its production directly alongside contracted flocks, which means when something goes wrong, the damage shows up immediately on a public balance sheet instead of being quietly absorbed by an anonymous family farm. And over the last 30 years, the egg industry made a decision that looked purely like an efficiency upgrade, but was actually a bet on stability that would eventually backfire in spectacular fashion. The average flock size for laying hen operations grew more than tenfold 30 years ago, from roughly 118,000 birds per flock 30 years ago to over 1 million birds per flock today. Fewer farms, bigger flocks, lower costs per egg in ordinary years, but concentration cuts both ways. When one bird in a flock of 1 million contracts a lethal, fast-spreading virus, the entire flock isn't a loss of a few thousand animals, it's a loss of up to 1 million animals, all at once, all in the same barn system, all beyond saving. Which brings us to the event that turned a quiet farming sector into front-page news. In February 2022, a strain of highly pathogenic avian influenza was confirmed in a commercial American flock. It has not fully left since. By the end of that first year, more than 43 million egg-laying hens had been lost, either to the disease itself or to the mandatory culling used to stop it from spreading further. Egg inventories in the country fell by nearly 30% in a matter of months. The price of a dozen eggs, which had hovered around $2, spiked to an average of $4.82 by January 2023, the sharpest jump the country had seen since 1980. The outbreak didn't stop there. It returned in waves through 2023, then again through 2024 and into 2025, eventually pushing the cumulative number of birds culled across the country past 100 million. By December 2024, the average price of a dozen eggs had climbed to $4.15, up more than a third from the year before. In some grocery stores, prices briefly touched $7 a dozen. Even Cal-Maine, the industry's largest and most sophisticated operator, wasn't immune. In one confirmed outbreak, the company was forced to cull 1.6 million laying hens and over 300,000 young pullets in a single event, a number that represents years of accumulated investment in genetics, feed, and facility infrastructure gone within days by government mandate for public health reasons no farmer can appeal. The federal government does step in with compensation. Between January 2022 and November 2024, the USDA paid out more than $1.4 billion in indemnity and support tied to the outbreak. But that payment covers the birds. It does not cover the months of lost production, the barns sitting empty during mandatory disinfection periods, or the psychological toll of watching a flock you fed and monitored daily be destroyed on a Tuesday afternoon because a single positive test came back overnight. Here's the quote-worthy truth hiding underneath all of this. An egg carton doesn't get expensive because chickens got harder to raise. It gets expensive because an entire industry gambled on concentration, and the bill for that gamble arrives all at once in the form of a virus that doesn't negotiate. And notice what this outbreak reveals about the broader poultry economy. The same consolidation that keeps prices low for consumers in calm years is precisely what makes the system catastrophically fragile in disease years. Efficiency and fragility, it turns out, are the same decision viewed from two different points in time. Step back from the headline crisis, and the daily economics are still brutal in their own quiet way, even in a year without an outbreak. Feed is the single largest recurring cost in both broiler and egg operations, typically consuming somewhere between 60 and 70% of total production expenses. It's tied to the price of corn and soybean meal, commodities that swing with weather, export demand, and global politics, none of which the farmer controls, and none of which the contract adjusts for in real time. Then come the costs that never make it into a recruitment brochure. Craig Watts eventually pointed this out about his own Perdue paperwork. The projected profit looked clean on paper, but real repairs, a replacement tractor, and additional hired labor quietly ate into that number every single year. Ventilation systems have to run constantly because a modern broiler house packs tens of thousands of birds into a single structure, and a failure in climate control on a hot summer night can kill a significant percentage of the flock before morning. Litter and waste disposal is a heavily regulated, ongoing expense because a single farm can generate the waste output of a small town. Biosecurity protocols, footbaths, restricted visitor access, dedicated equipment per barn aren't optional extras. They're often mandated by the very companies that also control the farmer's pay. Layer investigative reporting on top of that, and a pattern becomes visible. Reporting from Investigate Midwest found that the cost of raising chickens rose 35% between 2012 and 2022 alone. In Arkansas, poultry grower debt tripled over roughly the same period. In Missouri, it increased sixfold. When Tyson closed 6 processing plants in 2023, some contract growers were left holding upwards of $2 million in loans, tied to barns built specifically to that company's specifications. Specifications a new buyer, if one even exists, may have no use at all. This is the part of the story most people watching from a grocery aisle never see. A piece of physical infrastructure built exactly to one corporation's blueprint, financed by a family, that becomes worthless the moment that one corporation decides to walk away. Zoom all the way out, and the picture that emerges isn't really about chickens at all. It's about who absorbs risk and who collects reward in a supply chain built to separate the two as cleanly as possible. The company sets the genetics of the chick, the formula of the feed, the design of the barn, the schedule of pickup, and the formula that decides pay. The
The farmer supplies the land, the daily 12 to 16-hour labor, the multi-million-dollar loan, and, when disease strikes, the emotional weight of watching years of work destroyed under government mandate on a Tuesday afternoon because a single positive test came back overnight. Profit concentrates at the top of that arrangement. Risk concentrates at the bottom. And yet, the system persists, because from a distance, in a brochure, in a sales pitch, it still looks like the safest bet in agriculture. Stable demand, a guaranteed buyer, a company holding your hand through every step of production. It is a hand that's also holding the other end of your leash. The next time you walk down a grocery aisle and glance at the price of a dozen eggs, or order chicken at a restaurant without thinking twice about where it came from, remember what's actually sitting behind that shelf price. Not a farmer collecting easy profit off a bird that grows itself. A family that took on $1.5 million loan to build a structure they don't fully control for a company that decides their pay based on a ranking system stacked against half of them by design, exposed the entire time to a virus that can erase a year of work in a single government-mandated afternoon. Chicken didn't become one of the most fragile parts of American agriculture because chickens are hard to raise. It became fragile because the entire system was engineered to be efficient in good years and catastrophic in bad ones, and because the people who built the barns were never the people who owned what was inside them. That's the real cost of owning a chicken farm. Not the feed, not the construction loan, the realization that in this business, ownership and control were never the same thing. Which business should we break down next? A vineyard, a golf course, an airline, a theme park? Tell us in the comments. This channel exists to expose what's really happening behind industries that look simple on the surface and turn out to be anything but. If this changed the way you look at your next grocery run, subscribe. The next hidden economy drops next.